Hi, everybody. Welcome to NewsNite for Friday, February 18th. A beautiful weekend ahead, at least weather-wise. This week, it's all about words. Al Sharpton uses the word salute when he talks about Kelley Williams-Bolar, while Governor Kasich uses the word idiot. What was he thinking? And what's this word fracking? Those stories and more. A lot of words next on NewsNite. The nation's eyes again on Akron as the Reverend Al Sharpton comes to town to talk about the Kelley Williams-Bolar case. Let's get at it. Great to have along Ed Esposito from WAKR, and also great to welcome Steve Hoffman from the Akron Beacon-Journal. Jody Miller and Tim Riddell will join us in just a few moments. But guys, Al Sharpton had the nation's eyes on us. The key phrase seemed like most of the media jumped on was that he said, "I salute what Kelley Williams-Bolar has done." And there's a lot of ways to read into that.
I'm not sure that at this point the Reverend Al is adding much to the discussion, really. I mean, the idea of saluting this woman's behavior, I think everyone's decided that, you know, she did bad things to begin with, and then she made the situation worse by being fairly belligerent about it into the law enforcement process. So I'm not sure that he's adding much, and he brought up the educational issue, which again, you know, she has said that wasn't her intent. She was interested in safety. This idea of equality of education, I think, might have some legs, but we've been discussing it in Ohio for forever.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. God help us. I mean, the table's going to start shaking here. I agree with Steve. Although I do think it's there was kind of the same old bell rung by this professor at the University of at Syracuse University who came in. I think equating this case with civil rights is a stretch. You know, her children weren't denied an education or challenged at Copley-Fairlawn because of race, color, creed, or, you know, any civil rights. I mean, she was challenged because she didn't live in a district, which happens a lot and happened all the time. I do think it's kind of healthy that even though we just banged this drum and talked about education till we're blue in the face, and this debate is going to go on long after we're all dead, I do think it's good that this whole issue and discussion has kind of matured to the point where they are talking about bigger picture issues.
Where do we go from here, though? Have we finally hit that part in the case where this thing is going to tail off for a little while?
I think so. I think certainly the letters we're getting at the Beacon-Journal have started to tail off. You know, I assume that we're going to get a few new letters because of the Sharpton visit. But basically people are just rehashing the same points that have been rehashed. And, you know, in Columbus, we're soon to have a budget proposal from the governor mid-March. A lot of that budget, as every budget, will deal with education. And so there will be a discussion about providing children with the best education. I guess, as Ed's saying, part of this discussion does play into that, but it's a long-running discussion. Ohio has many, many different school districts. As we've said, some have open enrollment, some don't. So the question is, how do you deal with that system? And I don't really see. Tom Sawyer brought it up. Senator Tom Sawyer brought it up. I'm not sure at this point whether Governor Kasich and his Republican allies in the legislature are really up for a big discussion of open enrollment. If anything, I think they'd rather discuss more vouchers.
Right, and that's you know, you're getting into this point now where it's going to impact. There's going to be a lot of policy discussion going out of it. Representative Vernon Sykes, you know, would like to change the way you know, the language regarding felonies. So, I mean, you're going to see a lot of things come out of this. There's still going to be a lot of reporting. Obviously, things springing forward from the sidebar issues, if we're going to use, you know, the phrase that we would use in the newsrooms. But I think most of the sturm and drang is over.
Yeah, maybe the next big thing to follow is whether the governor decides he is going to pardon Kelley Williams-Bolar. But in the meantime, the governor has other issues, including what he said about an Ohio police officer. Take a listen.
Think about this. Have you ever been stopped by a policeman who was an idiot? I had this idiot pull me over on 315. Listen to this story. He says to me, he says, you passed this emergency vehicle on the side of the road and you didn't yield. He said, I didn't, officer, were you kidding? I didn't see any, I didn't even see where the heck was it? The last thing I would ever do would be to pass an emergency. Are you kidding me? He says, well, I understand that. Give me your license. Goes back to the car, comes back, gives me a ticket, says you must report to court. If you don't report to court, we're putting a warrant out for your arrest. He's an idiot.
All right, guys, he used the word idiot twice when talking about a public servant. Ed, this is doing no favors to him trying to ease into his first 100 days.
You know, just politically, I mean, you know, it's breathtaking. I blogged today that, you know, just we should send him flowers, because it's just, you know, just when it seems like, you know, well, gee, what else can we write about today? The governor opens his mouth with something like this, and ironically, it comes at a time when he's talking about customer service and respect for the customer, and then of course the Columbus PD pulls out the tape and shows that the officer acted professionally. Yeah. So I think some of this is John Kasich's style. You know, I'm sure it'll be discussed in the next segment. But, you know, style does matter. You know, the language that our public officials use, that our leaders use, whether they're public or private, you know, if a company CEO goes around calling people idiots, you know, it diminishes. It's not seen as a positive. I think it's, you know, in general, it's a message that John Kasich and others could learn. You can't call people idiots and expect not to pay a price for it. You can't call them scoundrels and not expect to pay a price for it. This is part of the civility argument.
Well, this is exactly the Kasich style. And some of it is endearing at times. I mean, he can come out with something that's spontaneous and heartfelt, and that's a good thing. This is the bad side of it. This is the bad side of being unscripted. And these things these days, every politician will tell you that everybody with a recording device of any sort now is a reporter. And if you're in a room and you're speaking and use that kind of language, there's a pretty good chance someone's going to record it and put it on YouTube. So he's got to watch himself. The other point I'd like to make is this is absolutely the last thing this guy needs at this point. And it's the last thing. I mean, this is a distraction. I do think it does damage his credibility somewhat. It damages his ability going forward. We have this collective bargaining bill on the table. It's very, very explosive. It's serious moving forward, an argument that I'll make later. But suffice it to say, he needs credibility on this issue, and to have this comment cycled in our new media reality, to have this sort of comment cycled back and back and back, and then he apologizes for it. That's another story. You know, I mean, this will go away quickly, but it's not. It's an unfortunate little episode.
But let's talk about that unions for a second, because Ed, it seems like he declared war from the time that he took office.
Well,
Rather than saying, I want to help cities and governments, he seems like he declared war on the unions.
No, he declared war before he took office. He said he was going to do something like this. And you know, you look at a story that we had, and I think the Beacon reported as well, about what the Mayor Plisquelic's thoughts. You know, I mean, he's certainly been a punching bag on the harsh side of working within collective bargaining framework. I think both sides privately, management will say there needs to be reform right now. Labor understands that, yeah, something's got to change, but they obviously want to protect as much of the status quo as they can, because it's been very, very good for them. Left out in this, I was struck by the governor of Wisconsin, because the Wisconsin fight over collective bargaining is much more harsh and vitriolic. You know, Madison's more nuts than Columbus. And I thought it was, you know, he said, you know, he keeps on bringing it back to the fact that, you know, he respects what people have to say and they should have a right to say it, but someone ought to listen to the millions of taxpayers who are footing the bill for this.
The problem
the problem with Kasich is he's not necessarily, that message gets drowned when he calls police officers idiots.
Well, they got to be careful with the overreach here. I mean, we need to look at collective bargaining, and going forward, it's a question of controlling costs. So there have got to be better mechanisms to control costs, especially when things get to binding arbitration. So there are issues of transparency, putting settlements and issues on the web. There are issues of what exactly an arbitrator can do and cannot do, and what they should consider, because this can be very expensive to cities, as we found out. But the idea of going too far, then you start to get the big reaction.
Right. Okay, more now on Senate Bill 5 as we move this conversation over to NewsNite.net.
For more NewsNite content, including extended discussions, full interviews, and the chance to speak your mind about the issues, join us online at NewsNite.net.
It's that fun word we like to say, fracking, but what is it? It has a lot to do with what's going on beneath our feet. Jody had a chance to sit down with Bob Downing and talk about it earlier this week.
Marcellus Shale is a black rocky formation that's probably 3,000 to 5,000 feet under the Akron-Canton area. And it is thicker toward the Ohio River and thinner and less lucrative, if you will, toward I-77. Okay. And it sort of ends at about I-77 from north to south. Okay. So the counties closest to the Ohio River are more lucrative for Marcellus than Summit County would be with cities, and Stark County and Tuscarawas. So the counties closer to the river, the drillers have more interest in at the moment. But last summer, starting in July and August, the land companies moved into our area, looking through county records to try and determine who owned large tracts of land and to try and arrange leases with as many landowners as they could. And in the last 6 months of 2010, more than 1,000 leases were signed in Stark County alone, and another 1,000 leases in Portage County alone, for drillers wanting to come in and drill.
Is that 1,000 wells, or is that far more than 1,000 wells on those 1,000 acres?
It would probably be less than that. I mean, a drilling company would need at least 40 contiguous acres on the surface to drill one well. Okay. And the way the drilling is done these days is called horizontal drilling. Mm-hmm. In the old days, drillers would basically drill a vertical well straight down and basically draw whatever gas or oil they could reach from that particular spot. Now, in the last few years, the technology has improved, and what they can do is drill straight down and then turn the drill so that you're drilling a hole horizontally. And this horizontal drill may be as long as 1 mile long.
Fracking, it's got a big impact on the area. Let's get to it. Great to welcome Tim Riddell here this week from WKSU. And also great to have freelance journalist and contributor Jody Miller here with us this week. And you had a chance to sit down with Bob. Do you have a clear understanding of what this is all about now?
It's as clear as mud. Fracking, as Bob explained, is a way of drilling, and it's been around for 60 years now. But the problem is that in our area of the country, drillers are starting to come up and come in and buy leases, because there's this wonderful Marcellus Shale, thousands of feet underground, that holds these pockets of natural gas. Mm-hmm. And the problem is you have supporters of fracking, this hydraulic fracturing of the rock, that say it's perfectly safe as long as it's done well. And you have opponents who are saying, oh, wait a minute, you've got a waste product that comes out of the ground. How do you distribute that and get rid of that? Because in Pennsylvania, they're allowed to dump this waste product, which literally has some carcinogenic chemicals in it, mm-hmm. in rivers. And then you've got the supporters who are saying it's perfectly safe, and it's an economic boom, which it is. When you can lease when you can lease your acreage for thousands of dollars. Plus, there's the need for a natural energy source, which they're saying natural gas is. So in Stark County in particular, mm-hmm. last year, thanks to the Canton Repository, I was able to find out that there were more than 1,000 leases that were registered and filed in the county.
Tim, is this a gold rush, though? Or?
It is, at least in Stark County. They call them landmen. They're the people for that work with these companies that do the drilling, and they're out trying to negotiate leases, and which often starts out at $75 an acre and sometimes ends up at $1,200 an acre. So mm-hmm. there's a lot of money in this, and Stark County has been a target of this leasing effort. I don't want to say target like that's pejorative. I mean, it's simply right. where they're trying to do this. I sat one evening with a group of people on the porch of a lady's house down there where about 15 or so of the neighbors were getting together to do this as a group. And their big concern was what Jody just talked about. That was, well, yeah, this appears from all the scientific information to be a safe thing to do if it's done right. But what if it isn't? And that was the dilemma whose horns they were on.
You say boom, people hear boom, because they're talking about natural gas and so far down. But this kind of sounds like what termites do in your house, and that's not a good thing.
Well, it's not a good thing. What what the supporters are saying is that the shale that they're drilling into is so far below the aquifers and the water table that it won't affect, wells in the communities. But there have been instances in other places in the country, particularly out in Colorado, where that's not necessarily the case. There's a documentary film out that was on Frontline on PBS, where they literally showed how fracking in that area of the country, a man would turn his water faucet on and sit there with a cigarette lighter, and the water would literally light on fire and explode. So there's a lot of, and this is what Bob Downing and I talked about. There are a lot of concerns about this. It's like the BP oil spill in the Gulf. If the technology is there to do it correctly, but there is no 100% guarantee that it will be done correctly and that everything will be taken care of. And that's what people in Stark County, in Plain Township in particular, the trustees there would like to have a moratorium on this. Because right now it's regulated by the state. And if you could get a moratorium until you can make sure that this is going to be a safe way of doing this. Because this is not something that's going away, Eric. Underneath the Marcellus Shale is an even deeper pocket called the Utica Shale, which may be even richer. So trying to gain the natural gas from this, it's going to be with us for a long time.
I feel like I'm taking a quiz here, and I should be taking notes on all of this. Tim, I give you the last word on this topic. How concerned should people be at this point?
Well, the first thing is that I think that everybody needs to recognize, and the folks that I was with down there in Stark County do, is that we need the energy. So I think the first part of the decision of should we go after this energy source probably is yes. But then there's the second part, and that is this particular approach, which right now is technologically the only way to commercially, in a commercially viable way, get to it. Is that approach safe? I think the evidence suggests that it is, but that you have to be careful. For example, one of the issues is that in our part of the country in particular, there's been a lot of mining for 150 years. That has changed some of the geology that's down there. Changed it in ways that we don't know about. There might be literally a mine shaft through somewhere that under normal conditions, this fracking, which can cause wastewater to move out, under normal conditions, it's perfectly safe. It's not going to get into the aquifer. But if there's an old mine shaft there, you could have a problem. So the final word is, well, it's going to happen, but they still need to use caution.
Well, when you say it's going to happen and use caution, that could describe what happened shortly after we finished taping last Friday. Mayor Plisquellic, at a press conference that many thought was an ordinary, routine thing last Friday, made a big announcement. Tim, you were there for it, and he talked for a while, as he can do. What did you take away from his announcement that he's running for a 7th term?
Well, I think he was genuine in saying that he had not made up his mind to do that until fairly quickly before he did.
Kind of like LeBron in the decision?
Well, yeah, I suppose.
Didn't make up his mind till the end there.
And I think that it did. I think a big factor in his mind was that the city's finances are in a tough shape because of the economy and so forth. And he didn't feel like he could leave it to anybody else. I mean, that's literally how he said it. And I think, having observed him for a while now, I think that's what he was thinking, is that and that says something also about the sense of what he feels he's doing. But he felt like he couldn't leave this problem to others.
That sound like what you'd expect?
Well, it does sound like what I would expect, and I have to confirm what Tim just said, and in that I had spoken with the mayor probably a week before he made the announcement, after an event with David James's State of the Schools. And I asked him then if he was going to run, and at that point, that was a week before that, he said he still wasn't sure. That he had friends and family who were trying to, they wanted him to do what he felt was best, and he still had not made up his mind. However, having said that, and in talking with him, he's not a quitter by any means. I think he's very, very honest in saying that there are a lot of things that he would still like to do in the city of Akron. I think he is worried about leaving the city of Akron, like Tim said, in someone else's hands. And I think that the bottom line is I don't think he feels like he has finished the job he wants to do. And I think he'd like to go out on a high note. And given the economy and some of the issues that the city is facing, I don't think this would be the year to go out. So it doesn't surprise me at all.
Odd that he makes the announcement, though, at a Friday presser. He's getting ready to go to Israel and not save it for the State of the City speech and try to get a little more news action out of it.
Well, the interesting thing about that is I asked him about the State of the City and when that was going to be, and he said he still had not made up his mind whether he was going to run, and the State of the City would, how the State of the City would be framed had a lot to do with whether he was going to run or not. So I think...
So he had to get in front of it?
He had to get in front of it, and I think knowing that he was going to Israel this week to do some more economic development stuff, I think he felt this was a good time to do that.
Did you feel his passion at all in this speech on last Friday?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, you can't cover the mayor of Akron without feeling his passion. It's the nature of the man.
Right, hold that thought. I want to continue this discussion right now as we move the discussion over to NewsNite.net.
On NewsNite.net, we cover a broader range of topics than we can on the air in 27 minutes. Be part of the conversation on our Facebook page and at NewsNite.net.
It's been a tough week for quite a few communities as we welcome Ed back to the panel. The Teodosio loss from last weekend, the two judges losing their daughter Andrea, and then the loss this week of a Uniontown police officer, Daniel Stiles. Nobody obviously predicted any of this, but both of these communities, the turnout in the Teodosio funeral and calling hours was overwhelming. The turnout we expect on Saturday for the funeral of this Uniontown police officer, both of these communities just feel like they've just had punched in the gut. It's a tough week.
Real tough week, because it's one thing to expect some things like this to happen, but when you have people who are the best, in many respects, and Andrea Teodosio was, by all accounts, 22 years old at the beginning of a wonderful life. She was loved. She contributed to the community. Just such a senseless loss, and on WAKR's Ray Horner show, I know they talked about maybe some good can come of it in terms of Joe Congini was talking about helmets and wearing helmets in when you're skiing and things of that sort. But nothing will. I don't know.
Nothing fills that void.
No, nothing will ever fill that void. The sadness I feel for her parents and her brother, it's almost overwhelming. And then you go, 3, 4, 5 days later, and you have a Uniontown police officer who was being groomed to be chief, as I understand.
That's captain, right?
Yes, who was directing traffic, and what a terrible loss for that community, and what a terrible loss for the woman who hit him, being blinded by sun glare. Thankfully, communities come together, and at a time like this, I think, when you've had a loss of this sort, one of the things that does sustain you is the outpouring of support from communities. So, thank goodness for that. But it's horrible.
And losing a police officer from Stowe, Jonathan Bastock, as well, who'd been home recovering after an injury that he had sustained on the job.
And again, just a purely accidental. I mean, he just had a knee problem, right?
Yeah, he was injured, as I understand, helping a motorist wipe something off of her license plate and slipped on the ice and had to go and recover.
Hurt his knee, and
we don't know yet.
And what goes through that, because they still had to determine what the exact. But it's again, as Jody, there's nothing you can say about these things. They're genuine accidents. They're not because somebody did something wrong. In the case of Andrea, so many people, most people ski without helmets.
Right.
The ski resort, she did nothing wrong. She wasn't off the trail. She was on. She was on. The proper trail. But people, when they ski, they fall. Certainly, the thing with Captain Stiles was. He was wearing the reflective vest, the full vest that he should have. Even though the State Highway Patrol is still investigating, it appears to be a case of sun glare. It just rips your heart out.
And as we look forward, if there's anyone that we can take something forward as journalists, the case of Captain Stiles with this sun glare. I know the State Patrol keeps a lot of factors when it comes to accidents, and there are quite a few roads right here in Summit and Stark County where that sun glare in the morning is just overwhelming. And I'm not sure there's any way to fix it, but should we be doing something to identify those real trouble spots? I mean, should this be a wake-up call? So we don't have
you know what, Eric?
Or is it too much to ask?
How can you do it? The sun moves every time. One trouble spot on one particular day is not going to be the same trouble spot, the next day.
If you're driving east in the morning, you have sun glare in the morning. If you're driving west at night, you have sunset at night. I mean, that's just this. Again, it's an accident. I mean, you know, would sunglasses have helped? Maybe yes, maybe no.
It's just, I think it's a question of education. Okay, let's educate everybody that we can that this could happen, and maybe if there's a little bit more care taken, it
But would it have? But would it have stopped this accident from happening? I don't know.
Probably not.
No, and getting people to just slow down only does you so much good too, because if you can't see, you can't see.
Right.
And that ends up causing accidents. But we have a few minutes left. I want to try to end on something a little more positive this week. The Black Keys, two great musicians from Firestone High School in Akron, making the whole community proud, winning not one but two, and just doing great at the Grammys this week.
Especially proud parents. I mean, it was great talking to Jim Carney from the Beacon Journal and Mary Stormer, former Akron School Board member, and just kind of how they've had an extended family right now, that you know, you basically have two sets of parents that are supporting Patrick Carney, and it was cool seeing that. It was nice. I'm struck by how many ties there are now for Grammy winners in Akron.
A journalist married to an Akron School Board member with 3 sons.
Well,
imagine that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What a makeup.
And they lived in my neighborhood. You know, I mean, my kids grew up with them.
6 degrees of the Black Keys, right?
Exactly. My one son played soccer with Danny Arbach, and it's wonderful to see their success. I mean, these are truly nice young men, and I was very proud as a mother to see them get up and be, you know, very well groomed, and they had tuxedos. They looked super. And you want to talk about weird 6 degrees of separation?
Yes.
Okay, Bob Downing, who I spoke with with the Beacon Journal, who I spoke with about the fracking, his daughter Katie has dated Danny Arbach's brother, Josh, I think it was Josh, for years, and they were at the Grammys too, and had a wonderful time.
I'm trying to follow all of that.
Oh, sorry.
You just lost me at the 4th degree there. I was just trying to figure out what turns you were going.
Oh, okay. Well, never mind. But, you know, it's wonderful, I think, for Akron.
This is a discussion over beer.
Well, yeah, okay.
But is it great to see some national recognition for musicians outside of Chrissy Hynde and some of the others we've seen over the years?
Well, you know, I just just this week, this station aired Phil Hoffman's documentary on steel drums at the University of Akron. Great story, well told. So you probably, you'll see that distributed, I'm sure, through all the PBS stations. You know, as long as they still have money. So you'll see that go through all these other stations. But it kind of highlights the creative forces at play here in Akron. It's not just about making tires.
Well, and it does feel good to end on something positive. Congratulations to them. Ed, Jody, thanks for being with us.
Congratulations to Fred Chenevy, too.
Yes.
At WHBC.
And best of luck to him.
Wishing him the best. Thanks also to Steve and Tim, and thank you for watching. More always on NewsNite.net, including our blog. See you next Friday.